The Hudson River Derby is not some ordinary rivalry. It was ordinary during the 2010 decade. But now we're in the 2020 decade. It's moved beyond just some regular exhibition between one MLS team that's trying to establish itself and another MLS team that has no real identity. And up to this day, that other MLS team still, it looks as if they still don't have an identity. And I'm talking about the Red Bulls, New York Red Bulls fans. You have every right to be pissed off at your team today. You have every right to lose hope in your team today. Because it just, from the outside looking in, me not being a Red Bulls fan or an NYCFC fan, from the outside looking in, it just looks bad for the team that's been around for less than 10 seasons. They haven't even been around for 10 seasons. A team that hasn't been around for 10 seasons. A team that doesn't have its own stadium. A team that's sharing its stadium with the team that's been around longer. It doesn't make sense for them to be performing better than that team that is more established. That team who was actually a pioneer. A team that should be far ahead than not only NYCFC, but at least half of the MLS. The New York Red Bulls is supposed to be far ahead than Atlanta, Philly, Seattle, Austin, Nashville, Houston. The New York Red Bulls is supposed to be up there with the LA Galaxy. But for some reason, whatever that reason is, I don't know about the history of the Red Bulls. I don't know about the history of their head coach and their GM and their ownership group. But for whatever reason, the New York Red Bulls is not up there with the Galaxy. For whatever reason, the Red Bulls has not taken football as serious as the Galaxy. So when I say the New York team that didn't have an identity starting off and up to this day still don't have an identity along with the New England Revolution, I'm talking about the Red Bulls. As a matter of fact, most of the pioneer teams, it looks as if they don't have an identity. And it looks as if the pioneer teams are catching up with the new teams. And that should tell you something, MLS, that the teams that you started with are looking up to the new teams. New York Red Bulls looking up to NYCFC. LA Galaxy looking up to LAFC. Dallas, if they're not careful, they might start looking up to Austin real soon. But it's a good thing that Dallas decided to get their act together at the same time that Austin started performing well this year. So Dallas, you may be able to dodge a bullet of my criticism. You may be able to dodge the same kind of criticism that the New York Red Bulls is receiving this afternoon. Good job, Dallas, for saving yourself from embarrassment, at least in the regular season. If Austin end up getting more championships than you, Dallas, you're going to be in the same boat as the New York Red Bulls. Now, this rivalry, the Hudson River Derby, the reason why the Hudson River Derby is not an ordinary rivalry, because we are in the decade where America will not only be hosting the FIFA World Cup, America might host the FIFA Club World Cup and the Women's World Cup. So that's 3 major FIFA competitions, 3 major global soccer competitions that will be taking place in America during this decade. This is one of the reasons why the 2020 decade is the golden era of American soccer. As a matter of fact, we could say that is the ultimate reason that the 2020 decade is the golden era of American soccer. You see, you have MLS, New York Red Bulls, NYCFC. You got to understand this. This is the decade where you'll have many people like me who wasn't watching MLS in the 2010 decade. We weren't watching MLS in the early 2000s. We weren't watching between 96 and 99. This decade is the first year. It'll be the first year for many of us to ever sit down on our laptops or our cell phone to actually watch the MLS game from the first game of the season all the way to the last game of the season. This season right here is my second season, my second full time ever watching MLS from beginning, first game of the season, all the way to the end of the season. And I'm still learning about the game of soccer. I'm still learning about how the league operates because the league is evolving. As a result of that, we don't know who the number one team in New York is. And we don't really care about the past history of both New York teams. But because NYCFC is so young, NYCFC doesn't have a rich history from the 2010s. Because the New York Red Bulls has been so mediocre throughout its history, they don't have a rich history. So this is the decade where we'll determine who's going to be the face of New York. There cannot be two faces of New York. I'm sorry. Yes, both teams can be good now. That doesn't mean that one team has to be bad, like the NBA, like the Knicks are bad and the Brooklyn Nets are good. It doesn't have to be like the NBA. Both teams can still be good. However, there cannot be two faces of New York. There cannot be two kings of New York. In the history of sports, there's never been two kings. There's never been two great teams in the city. There's always been one great team in the city. So because of that, this is the decade where we're going to find out who that face of New York is. Why it has to be determined during this decade? Because this is the golden era. This is when most of us are going to start tuning into MLS and American soccer in general. And this is the decade that will determine if we will continue to watch the sport in the 2030s, the 2040s, and the 2050s. It all starts right here. How the MLS performs to the national audience. How the MLS presents its product to the national audience. How MLS teams compete against each other and when presenting their product to the national audience. That will determine if we continue to watch in the 2030s, the 2040s, and the 2050s. It all matters during this decade. This is why whenever there's a Hudson River Derby, and I mean any Hudson River Derby, not preseason not included, but whenever there's a Hudson River Derby going on, even the US Open Cup, Leagues Cup, CCL, whenever there's a regular season or a major tournament Hudson River Derby going on, that game matters. A lot of people are saying that, or NYCFC themselves saying they swept the Red Bulls for the season to make it seem like the Red Bulls didn't beat them at all. So they're not including the US Open Cup, that US Open Cup defeat. NYCFC, US Open Cup also matters. I know it doesn't count in your regular season standings and it has no effect towards your MLS playoff chase, but it still matters. And it matters because you have to look, this is the decade where you and the Red Bulls, y'all have to set yourself apart from each other. One team will rise up and another team will fall down because there cannot be two kings of New York. There's not enough room for two kings of New York. And that's not how sports operates. Any sports, there's never two kings in one city. Now, I repeat, that doesn't mean that it has to be like the NBA where one team is good like the Brooklyn Nets and the other team is bad like the New York Knicks. Both teams can be good, but both teams cannot be great. Look at what's going on in LA. The quick shift of power. In less than 1 year, LAFC has already taken over Los Angeles. And it didn't even take 1 year. NYCFC, you're on that same trajectory of LAFC. But what makes your trajectory kind of better than LAFC is you did it based on building your own farm system. You didn't have to chase after players overseas. I mean, when I say overseas, I mean like recruiting them like in the middle of the season from other leagues. You build your supremacy from the ground up, NYCFC. And another thing that helps is the family that you're a part of, City Football Group. So you have a lot of connections to resources. City Football Group is doing a better job than the Red Bulls group. Because I know the Red Bulls got other teams in Europe and other parts of the globe too. So every game for the rest of this season, for the rest of this decade, 2023, 2024, 2025, all the way through 2029, every Hudson River Derby match that takes place during this decade matters, except preseason. Now, if there's a Hudson River Derby that takes place during preseason, which I hope not, but if there's a Hudson River Derby that takes place during preseason, no, that doesn't matter. It's preseason. But every Hudson River Derby that takes place during regular season and U.S. Open Cup, Leagues Cup, CCL, playoff, it matters. It matters. Now, New York Red Bulls, it's not over yet. You still have time to catch up. Hey, when the playoff starts, it's a new season. We all know what NYCFC did to New England last year. Red Bulls, once you get in, it's a new season. You still have time to adjust. You still have time to correct your mistakes. NYCFC is not too far ahead of you. All you need, New York Red Bulls, is an MLS Cup title this season and either a CCL title next year or a Campeones Cup title. All you need is 2 more major championships. All you need is 2 more major championships and you're tied with NYCFC. And you can do that in less than 1 full season. You can do that in less than 1 full year, New York Red Bulls. The MLS is a forgiving league. Soccer in general, the business structure, the competition structure of professional soccer is a forgiving business. It's a forgiving system. And it gives many teams opportunity to catch up. Well, actually, I take that back because Europe is not forgiving. Professional American soccer is forgiving. Professional American soccer gives every team an opportunity to be great. There's no excuse for any major professional soccer team in America not to be great. Because there are multiple resources and multiple opportunities, multiple tournaments, multiple competitions available for every team in the MLS to be great. So New York Red Bulls, you still have time. You still have time to correct your mistakes and you still have time to get it together. Lastly, the 30,000 fan attendance at Yankee Stadium on Saturday. New Yorkers are finally starting to get the memo. New Yorkers are finally starting to get it. They're finally starting to get it. This is what we need to see more often. 25,000, somewhere between 25,000 to 30,000. Every NYCFC home game, we need to see that. I don't care if the game is going to be at Yankee Stadium, the Met Stadium, East Hartford, Connecticut, Jamaica, Queens, maybe Columbia University, maybe Long Island University, maybe Fordham University. Wherever NYCFC plays for their home game, there needs to be multiple fans, 25 to 30,000 fans every time. New Yorkers are finally starting to get the memo. New Yorkers know what's up. So NYCFC, you have to continue to deliver. I'm not going to get into the stadium thing because that's too much politics. And I'm not going to talk about NYCFC stadium anymore until there's a clear sign that something is going to happen. I just don't want to I don't like talking too much politics. I only talk it when I have to. So I'm not going to get too much into that. New York Red Bulls, NYCFC. Every Hudson River Derby game that takes place during this decade matters. This is deeper than a rivalry. This is deeper than sports. There cannot be 2 kings of New York. One of you have to separate yourself from the other to position yourself to be the face of New York. That when politicians hear about, when fellow politicians get together and they talk about who's the local MLS team, they'll say either NYCFC or the New York Red Bulls, but they won't say both. When celebrities in New York get together and they talk about the local MLS team, they're either going to say NYCFC or New York Red Bulls, but they're not going to say both. When New York rappers start to freestyle or make their mixtape or make a song out of their album, and they refer to one of the New York MLS team, they're going to say either NYCFC or the New York Red Bulls, but they're not going to say both. This is the decade that will determine such. This is why every Hudson River Derby during this decade matters. Championships matters. Star players matters. We need to see a star. We need to see a star emerge after the departure of Tatsy Castellanos. Somebody got to step up to be the man. The Brooklyn Nets has Kevin Durant. The New York Giants has Saquon Barkley. The Yankees had A-Rod and Derek Jeter. NYCFC, you had Tatsy Castellanos. Well, who the hell you got now? Somebody has to step up to be the man. So NYCFC, New York Red Bulls, remember, there cannot be two kings of New York. Somebody has to separate themselves from the other to emerge as the man, to emerge as the face, be the face of New York. This is the decade that more Americans will be watching the game more than ever. People like me, soccer purists, I'm sorry, but this decade is not for you. This decade is for the casual American sports fan like me that is interested in soccer, and we're just trying to learn the game. We're just trying to become more familiar with the game. We just want the game to become more recognizable to us. So we don't care. A lot of us don't care what happened in the 2010 decade. Anytime before the 2020s, a lot of us don't really give a damn. This is why this decade is so important for any MLS team that really wants to become popular and that really wants to be the face of their city. This is the decade. This is the decade. You know, I'm well over my 15 minutes, so I will just stop right there. Remember, NYCFC, New York Red Bulls. There cannot be two kings of New York. One of you are going to have to separate yourself from the other.